Just in case you missed it, it's the top 5 sports talkers of the day. Now, it's time for Dan Barrero's Top 5 at 5.
I feel like it's been a while since we've had a top 5. Well, first of all, you were out a lot of last week, right? After I was out part of the week before.
Yeah, I was pretty much out all week.
You were very busy. You had bowl responsibilities. You had Gopher women's basketball responsibilities as well. So it's a good chance for you, I think, to sort of see whether you can still measure up for the top 5 at 5, the high standard that is generally associated with it.
Good luck.
Okay, that sounds promising.
10 minutes before today's roster deadline, the Minnesota Wild have just activated defenseman Jake Middleton off of long-term injured reserve. That's a tweet from about an hour ago from Russo Radio. You were just talking with Lou Nanny about it. So it sounds like Midzi, his return is imminent.
I didn't realize that's his nickname, huh? Midzi.
Yeah, well, you got to go S-Y.
Yeah.
And
Middletonzy is too long.
So you just cut it off at Midzi.
Okay.
So Midzi apparently is back. If not tonight, then maybe a little bit later, but he's on the roster now, so he's good to go, and that's good news. The Gus Bus is starting tonight. It's the Wild and Blues from XL Energy Center coming up tonight. The Blues fighting for a wild card spot at the moment.
We're out at 6:10 for that reason, right? But we got Vikings programming,
exactly right.
And then we'll go to Minnesota Wild hockey.
Exactly right. So that's coming up about an hour and 30 minutes from now. Hour and 45 minutes from now, the pregame show with Kevin Fallness. We were out last night because your Minnesota Timberwolves were in action. Everybody wants to talk about the big move that Mike Conley came off the bench for the first time in a while since his Utah days, if I remember correctly. And Dante DiVincenzo, DDV, as Timberwolves Twitter likes to call him, got the start. And the Wolves promptly got down by double digits in the first quarter.
First time around, it didn't really go very well.
Doesn't seem to matter. But you know who played outstanding off the bench and got the team and the crowd going to help get them back into the game before Anthony Edwards took over in the fourth quarter? Mike Conley. Made a couple of threes, made a floater, forced LA to call a timeout at one point. There was a time, Dan, when I thought Conley was never going to miss a three last year. He was shooting, I think, 45%.
Yeah.
And now, every time he shoots it, I'm just like wishing it in.
Here's the other thing. I mean, even like his 2-point shots, he wasn't like 32%. Just all of his shooting percentages have been awful.
They say there's no cheering in the press box, but as you know, Wolves are A1 for day one for me.
Yeah.
I was basically standing in my living room as Conley was on his little, because you just want the guy. I mean, he's 100 years old. Yeah. He's a consummate pro. Obviously, we're biased. We have him on the show.
Correct.
We're hoping to have him on tomorrow. And the Wolves need him to get going, or they need somebody to get going, and he did. And then Anthony hit a couple of hero shots in the fourth quarter. But it's never easy with the Wolves, is it? They still had to rely on a missed free throw and then 2 putback attempts that were really good opportunities that might have tied the game, but they ended up getting the victory over LA.
If there's an art to the act of deliberately missing a free throw, whoever took that free throw did it.
It was
a good miss. Yep. And as you say, there were 2 legitimate opportunities to tip the ball in at that point. Now, there was good, I thought, reaction by Wolves players under the basket, including Randall. I think, wasn't Randall in at that point?
He may have been.
Randall did not have many minutes last night.
That was the other thing I was going to say.
Yeah. That's
the other sneaky move.
Correct.
Randall played 23 minutes.
That's got to be the fewest he's played this season, or close to it.
But you saw Naz Reid play really well.
Yeah.
And Dante, I think, played pretty well. And Minot got mixed in for some more minutes, and so it was good last night.
Well, we'll talk about it more a little later in the remaining minutes of the show, because we do have kind of a wide open schedule, no guests the rest of the way. That it's the catch-22 is DiVincenzo makes if Conley as the point guard is going to be asked to play off the ball a decent amount, because that's kind of the way the Wolves do it with Randall and Edwards having the ball a lot. That's not his strength. He's not a great off-the-ball kind of a player. Now, if he's hitting 44% from 3, you can get away with it. But DiVincenzo obviously is a more natural play away from the ball, correct?
Yes.
On the other hand, you go, but what if your offense is a mess? Don't you need your pure point guard back? That's been the reason a lot of nights where you say, well, you got to, if it's not Conley, it's got to be somebody like Conley, because none of the rest of our ball handlers are pure point guards. They may be capable of bringing the ball up the court, but that's not it. So that's what makes this so tricky for the head coach moving forward. It almost feels like, now maybe the lineup switch is semi-permanent, but it almost feels like, again, they're in the mode now where it feels as if their personnel on a given night, even in a given stretch of a game, might have to be different. And that's doable, but it's also hard in a league where players and everybody likes to sort of get the idea of get used to whatever role that they're supposed to be in. And now it's very clear that the mandate has gone out to, we got to just keep throwing stuff against the wall until we finally find something that might stick for longer than a week.
So the Wolves have a game now tonight on the road in New Orleans. What would we call this night tonight, Dan? On NBA Twitter, what do we call this?
Ooh.
A back-to-back on the road.
Oh, schedule loss.
However, if the team is 7-29, which the New Orleans Pelicans are.
Oof, I didn't realize they were that bad.
7-29, can you classify it as a schedule loss and answer that? And then I have another follow-up to this. If the team is 7-29 that you're playing on the back-to-back, can you call it a schedule loss?
I wouldn't think with a straight face you could, but there will be people who say, well, did they play last night?
Yep.
At home, and then they had to go on the road? Schedule loss. I hope folks will sort of resist from scratching that itch.
The other amendment for tonight's game is that what's one of the reasons why New Orleans is 7-29? Now you're sitting down. People hopefully are driving. They don't go off the road. Zion Williamson has been out. I know that might surprise some people that aren't watching League Pass for the New Orleans Pelicans, but Zion Williamson has not played since November 6th. He's missed 27 games. He's missed 2 months, but he is back tonight. He has started practicing last week, apparently, and is back tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So it's not the 7-20. Don't let the 7-29 fool you, because Zion's been out for 2 months. Now he's there.
Yeah, they're another team where they've got a couple players whose names always come up in trade rumors.
Brandon Ingram's one of them.
And Williamson, but then you're back to with Williamson. How could you possibly take a chance on him because of his inability to stay healthy or to play? That's sort of part of the issue now with Jimmy Butler as well, which is we were going to try to get into a little bit later in the broadcast too. You know what they call this in the business? They may not call it a schedule loss. They call it a trap game.
Trap game.
Trap game, because I got to believe we've been vulnerable enough this year that other home teams are going, hey, we might be able to steal it. And the way the Wolves came out, I didn't watch the first quarter, but I heard it was dead in that building.
Yes.
They played dead and had to be a rude awakening because, as you say, we make this big move to go to a different lineup, and at least the first time out, did not do anything with it at all.
So it's New Orleans tonight. It's Orlando on the road on Thursday, and then the very plucky John Morant-led Memphis Grizzlies come to Target Center on Saturday night. That's the next Wolves home game.
Well, are you interested in omens?
Omens?
Well,
I'll take them.
One's being offered up by 763 guy. Wolves lost in Detroit the night before they lost. The Vikings lost in Detroit.
Yep.
The Wolves beat an LA team, the Clippers, the same week we play the Rams in Los Angeles.
Kind of a stretch.
Think it is?
Kind of a stretch.
Sounds a little desperate.
But I'd take it.
Yeah.
I'll say this. Sam Darnold better not start like the Wolves did last night against the LA team.
Yeah, that might be trouble.
He better start a little bit better.
You'd like to think.
If we're going to make that comparison. Lastly, because we talked to Daniel Jones, he's on the 53, mostly to be eligible for compensation if he does, in fact, sign somewhere else this offseason. Vikings report there. The Gopher game last night. I don't know if you stayed up and watched it.
I did not. I forgot that they were on, actually. Yeah. I completely forgot.
I was bouncing back and forth for a while. Wolves win.
Yeah.
And then I flipped back to the Gophers, and they're playing well. They're shooting the ball well. Isaac Osama, the freshman from Cherry's, playing great. Career high for him. Parker Fox is like 17-year-old Parker Fox. He had a Rudy Gobert-like shot on the right baseline as the shot clock winds down.
Did he bank it in from the baseline?
He didn't bank it in, but it was like a floater.
Oh.
It was like a one-legged running floater from the baseline, like Rudy in Game 7, basically.
Yes.
And you think, they can't lose this game. They're playing well. The ball's moving, the whole bit. And they had the game won, not once, but twice, including in overtime, when their best free throw shooter, gets fouled. Mike Mitchell with 7 seconds left, something like that. They're up 2. He misses both. And Caden Betts fouls an Ohio State guy on purpose because he must think they're up 3. And that was the bit because they'd done that earlier. Ohio State guy makes both free throws with 4 seconds left in overtime. The Gophers lose. They end up losing by 1 because they had a flurry of threes in the final minute of double OT. But, I mean, at a season where it doesn't look like they're going to have a lot of victories, at least at this early spot, and haven't shot the ball very well, to lose that one last night is rough. As deflating as it gets.
It has to be. And as you said, I mean, in fact, I think who was they playing last night?
Ohio
State. Did they beat Kentucky or played Kentucky?
They beat them by
close?
like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got talent.
They got some ability.
Nice
They're
win.
up and down. It would have been a nice win. And now the meat grinder is we're back on the road, aren't we, at Wisconsin
Friday
next?
night against Wisconsin.
And then we got another road game, I think, Monday night.
Maryland.
And you're running that risk again for the second time in the last 3 years, I think, in the Big Ten of getting buried.
Where's the relief?
Early. Where's the relief going to come? And we talked about it earlier. You mentioned the Mitchell missed free throws, but they were under 50% from the line for the game. Yeah, so it's just not a team that's got no margin for error can't possibly be shooting less than 50% from the free throw.
And they got a break because they actually fouled at the end of regulation on a game-tying dunk. And then the Ohio State guy missed the free throw with like 4 seconds left. They had a couple of chances then to score. It was wild. Yeah. I was drained. I'm still drained because I love the Barn and I love that team. And it ain't good. It's because
they wasn't the game before that, wasn't it? They played Purdue pretty tight for a half, and then it was just an embarrassment
for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It was even like more dramatic.
Was it more than?
Yeah. It was like a 2-point game with 10 minutes to go, and we were in Charlotte watching it from dinner to the hotel, which was like a 4 or 5 minute walk. Yeah. They got down by like 15 in that time frame. So it's a tough one.
Here's what we'll do. I got some other Wolves items I want to get into, and then we'll spend more time on your favorite football team, the Minnesota Vikings. Now that we're on the day after, so to speak, review a couple of subjects, Vikings related, we got into much earlier in the program. And we'd like you to keep the text coming into the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line. We accept all questions and observations at 64686.
Go hang with Max Fuller tonight at Rack's Bar in Burnsville, right off 35. Wolves watch party tonight. Get there at 7 o'clock. Watch the Wolves. Sign up for your chance to qualify for first-round playoff tickets next year. Full details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar. Go hang with Max in Burnsville.
I don't know that I doubt that we have the audio. I probably should have asked you earlier, but we had mentioned that the Wolves head coach had been sounding a bit exasperated by the number of questions regarding over the last few weeks about the possibility of changing the starting lineup. And I think after our last game, previous to last night, he'd said, look, if I really thought that was the key to everything, I probably already would have done it. And that we got to remember that it has an effect on then who's with the second unit. There's a lot of complicating factors there. Well, then last night for the Clippers game, he changes the starting lineup. He sits Conley, and then he puts Dante DiVincenzo into the lineup. And apparently after the game, I think it was Johnny Athletic who asked him about that decision. And the quote was something, I think, pretty close to, I just read all the papers, John. When everybody was telling me, he said, you know what? Bleep. I should change the starting lineup. And that's exactly what, with mixed results, frankly, because third quarter it went better than the first.
Chris Hine and Jace Frederick were very pleased that he read the newspaper and not the Athletic.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. You're right.
Apparently he doesn't know much about the Athletic. He's been reading the papers.
So will this start any kind of now, earlier I got a text from somebody saying, that's kind of, this particular texter thought it was a little too smart-assian that that he's, let's face it, I mean, Finchie's had a great honeymoon period here with the media, and why not, given the direction the team took last year, that he took the team to the conference finals, and that this texter felt like, it's a little bit, come on, man, it's not like people have been all over here. But when I watched it, I thought it was a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. I didn't think he was saying it as if to sort of say bleep you in any meaningful way. It would start a great trend if other coaches...
If we could just decide things for coaches.
Or they would admit that, I've looked at some of your ideas. I think they're pretty good. Let's go ahead and do it. I remember to this day, one of the years the Vikings got eliminated in the playoffs in the Gaardsy era. And it was one of the times, they won in San Francisco in 87, and I think the next 2 years they got clocked. And after one of those destructions, I think it was still Gaardsy. Yeah, well, it had to have been Gaardsy. I think I came back. My column coming back was, we need, the Vikings do need a shakeup, and they should start by having Jerry Burns call the plays. And Burns, of course, was head coach then. In those days, I don't think anybody was doing that, quite frankly. Now it's become fashionable big time, right?
Yep.
Well, suffice to say, Burns did not step to the podium and say, Danny, thinking about it, pretty good idea. And I was trying to suck up to him because he's a great offensive mind.
He was.
And I'm thinking,
Franz Harkington talked about that a lot with us.
Exactly right. I mean, he was ahead of his time with his West Coast. He had the West Coast offense before Bill Walsh did. And I was looking at it as, all right, what can you do? If you're not going to be able to change personnel, have him call the plays, man. But I don't think Gaardsy wanted to get back to working quite to that level. And he also, I think, grew up at a time where, no, you're the head coach. You got to worry about running the game, and you can't be sitting there with that chart worrying about, that play card, worrying about plays. So not quite as immediate a response in Burns' case, since he never did what I asked him to do, compared to Johnny and others wondering about, inserting somebody else in the starting lineup.
Well, I don't blame Finchie because they have literally asked him about this weekly for the last month because the team has been meandering. Obviously, they're a game ahead 500. My story along those lines is PJ Fleck related, where it was they were very conservative going into the half one of those times. Remember, he does that a lot, right? This is like 3 years ago, probably.
This is pre-Brosmer.
All
right, fair enough.
And they were extremely conservative going into the half, where he let like a minute and a half go off the clock for no reason and then settled for a field goal. I think they missed it or they blocked it. So they get booed off the field. Everybody's mad. You got to ask him about it. Why were you so conservative? Well, you know what? We're getting the ball, and he's doing his whole explanation. The next week at Northwestern, they throw it in the exact same situation, and it inevitably gets tipped and picked off right before the half.
Of course.
So then it's the best because then they win, and then you can go, why are you so reckless? Like, have a little, calm down a little bit. And he had to make the point, and I wasn't thinking of any of you when I did that. It was, it's like, I think you might have been, but he completely changed it, and of course the ball got intercepted the very next week after everybody was asking him why he was so conservative. A
lot of people are asking again today the obvious Wolves question beyond the lineup question is Julius Randle tradable? Might he be traded? And I guess the best answer I could give is I wouldn't be shocked if he were, but I'm not sure what his value is at this point because as an expiring contract, he's kind of weird. He's got one of those contracts where he's got a player option for next year.
Yes.
Now, the assumption in the old days would have been, well, he doesn't want to exercise that option because he wants another longer-term deal. But because of the second apron, because of the certain the realities that a lot of teams are facing regarding the cap, maybe there's not a big multi-year deal out there for him, right? And so then if you trade for him, is it possible he decides that, I don't have that much else out there. I'll take the money for this upcoming, that would be for this upcoming year. And then at that point, then it's not like, from a salary cap standpoint, he's like a salary slot, right? He may not be a salary slot. So I think all along when they made this deal, they were not committed to the idea of keeping him long term. I also think they hoped that it would go well enough that they had a problem on their hands, to figure out, well, can we come up with a contract that works? And he hasn't been good enough. I don't think he's their only problem, but it's not difficult to see why almost every game there's somebody putting together a loop of Randall defensively. Generally speaking, drifting towards the free throw line as the ball's moving around the perimeter.
Yep.
Leaving open jumpers for people at will, and even in some cases, getting down the field slow.
Right, not getting back in transition in obvious situations.
He's not been awful in all aspects of what he does, but Lavelle was on, I think, today with PA, and I think it was him. It may have been PA. It was one or the other, saying that when the trade went down, he thought that the Wolves had gotten a couple of dogs, and meaning that in the good sense.
Yep.
And I did too. I really did. We talked about this a lot when the trade was made, and we tried to talk a lot of people off the ledge about it. And that's what's disappointed and surprised me about Randall. He's what I call a selective dog, where there's 3 or 4 minute stretches where you go, he's into it. On both sides, rugged. Scoring or trying to help defensively. But there's not enough dog in him defensively at all, I don't think. And it's exasperating to watch. And it's disappointing as someone who endorsed the deal to have to sort of acknowledge that right now it does not look like a very good deal for the club. Now, I asked Johnny the other day, is the solution on Randall to literally tell him to stop shooting? And to say, we want you to run the show as much as one can as a forward, a point forward kind of a deal. Just worry about you can handle the ball, make plays for other people, and occasionally you're probably going to score as well. Is there enough meat on that bone? I don't know. Could that change things up? Does that interest him? I'm not sure how he feels about that, because he's a good passer.
He is.
He can be a very good passer.
Especially on the break.
But he gets lost defensively all the time, and there's no excuse for it. There's zero excuse for it as often as it happens. There just isn't. And then offensively, he's an iso ball guy a little bit, which I can live with because that's how a lot of good scorers operate. But he gets too often in that, the free throw line situation where he's trying to turn one way, turn the other way, and the ball gets knocked away from him. I feel like 3 times a game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Too easily. Where that just can't happen. So, I don't think the president of basketball operations is ready to make a move now. But I do think, and here's the kicker. I mean, the guy who's the biggest Randall fan is the head coach.
That's the issue they have.
And I don't know how he reconciles that with that lack. I mean, that's just flat out laziness sometimes defensively or disinterest. And, so does Conley like him as much? Maybe not. But does he not like him enough to where he's ready to make a move? My guess is he's probably going to want to wait this thing out a little bit longer.
$30 million player option next year.
Okay,
31 basically, $30.9 mil. And
that's I
mean, I'm not. He's not the worst player in the world.
No.
But the defensive stuff comes up too much. I think it deflates the team at times.
I agree.
I think we've seen that body language a number of times, and he's talked a lot about trying to figure out his role and where he fits in. And I'm sure that's difficult. Yeah. But the one non-negotiable is just figure out where you're supposed to be defensively here, because that is what this team.
Yeah.
As long as you're going to have Rudy and deal with everything that Rudy brings in terms of lack of offense and everything, you're going to be a defense team first team. And so you got to buy into that part, and he hasn't done that, I don't think, enough. When that's why they're part of the reason why they're 18 and 17.
Fairness and savagery. Gobert has not been as consistently good defensively as he was a year ago. That he factors into that for sure. And again, it's this catch-22 of the Wolves are better off if Rudy Gobert's touching the ball more often, if you can get him to 10 or 11 points. And I know the catch-22 is, but you see 3 or 4 times where they get him the ball, what he does with it?
He's going to kick it.
It's either an air ball or he's going to kick it or it's going to get blocked at the rim. If you're going to play him and start him, you still have to keep him as involved as you can, because I do think that's affecting what he ends up doing on the other end as well.
Time now for the Vikings Report on the Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Vikings safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
Head over to our contest page. You can enter for your chance to win a pair of passes to an early screening of the new historical thriller, September 5th. It's in theaters January 17th. September 5th. the name of the movie. It's in theaters January 17th. All at KFAN.com, keyword contest. September 5th, the movie.
So that's not when the movie is premiering, and it's not called January 17th. It's premiering January 17th, and it's called September 5th.
That's my understanding.
Okay. But what if it's reversed? Well, if it's reversed, it's a little late because September's already passed us by.
Just go to KFAN.com, keyword contests.
Oh,
and they'll have all the answers for you.
Speaking of that, it's now official, right? The new iHeartRadio app is out. And I have to say, I think it's worth all the fanfare. I really do. It's first of all, aesthetically, I would call it very pleasing to start with. It is free, which doesn't hurt.
We know that.
And it also, basically, what I got out of it was an attempt to sort of like wake up the echoes of when some of us old timers think about radio. An attempt to put there's a scan button on there where you establish what market you're in.
Yep.
And then you just hit the scan button, and they'll just basically go station to station like you can on your radio dial, right? That's the bit.
Which
That's
we
what
used to do back in the day on
100%.
road trips and things like that.
Yes, for sure.
Chris Collinsworth was trying to do that here to get good sports breakdowns when he came into town, and he couldn't find one.
We failed him miserably that night. And then there's a really easy now favorites button.
The presets,
as we call it, which also is from your radio dial on, your old fashioned radio, right? So I heartily recommend that even if you have the old one, get this one because I do think it's more convenient.
Yep, update it.
It's a nice look. I think it's very reliable, which is not to be underrated. And then there's a million features. I mean that I'm not even beginning to discuss that give you, I think, greater flexibility.
So remember when we got the rights to the Timberwolves a year and a half ago now at this time, and what did everybody say? Well, how are you going to be able to find the Timberwolves channel? As I said at the time, first of all, my 7-year-old mother found it without incident and listens to all the games on the Timberwolves channel if they're not on the fan like they were last night. And now the beauty of it is, and I've already done this, I set my presets.
Me too.
KFAN, obviously.
Yes.
KFAN Plus, home of Gopher Women's Basketball. I don't know why. I'm usually on it, so I don't know why I need to do that. But our national shows.
Yeah.
Shabuzi Radio, because I want to listen to Shabuzi as much as possible.
Not as much for me.
But you can do whatever you want.
Exactly.
And the Timberwolves channel.
Exactly.
So tonight when I'm driving around.
It's literally then it's just a button and you hit it. It's right there. You don't have to search for it. You have to type in Timberwolves.
Exactly.
It's right there for you.
So tonight when I'm picking up my oldest son from his basketball practice after our show and Kevin Fallness has bored me on the Wild pregame, I can flip it from 100.3 right to the Timberwolves channel and listen to Alan Horton talk about Wolves Pelicans.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
It's definitely worth the time, and it really doesn't take, I wouldn't say, all that much time to get it done either. I got more Viking stuff I want to get to before we wrap things up a little bit early. Again, today, spent a lot of time early in the show, basically from 3 o'clock till Kevin Seifert left us at 4:30, talking almost nothing but National Football League. And I know we're going to talk, obviously, a lot of college football tomorrow, playoffs tomorrow with Glenn Mason, not in studio, but by telephone. He'll help us preview. What is it? The first game is the first semifinal Thursday night?
Thursday, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one's Friday?
Yes.
Okay. We're in the Final Four now.
Ohio State, Texas, and then Penn State, Notre Dame.
That is 100% correct. So I need your help a little bit because I do want to talk a little bit of college football. We haven't had a chance to talk on air much at all for all the obvious reasons, just from the scheduling standpoint. There's a lot of discussion now that we're down to 4 about, the committee, whoever put together this format, they blew it regarding the byes. All the bye teams immediately lost, and that should go away. And then there's the angst about the one-sided nature of so many of the games. And I get it. They're not as much fun to watch, obviously. Who likes to watch routes, unless it's your favorite team that's doing the routing. So everybody's rooting for closer games. And what have we had so far? I mean, the closest game would be the Texas
Arizona State
game, which started out as a disaster.
Game. Yeah.
And then Arizona State probably should have won the damn thing.
Yep.
And they did not. I guess I'm curious to get your view because I look at it as we're losing. it's the only sport I feel like that we lose our minds in when there are decisive outcomes. It's like it happens. It doesn't mean the entire system failed or should be repudiated. I don't even think it means that the teams that got there don't deserve to be there, right? That's the game that we love to play. And I was hoping that suggestion would have been mocked on the basis of the number of teams that didn't get there who ended up, including Alabama, who ended up struggling in their own meaningless bowl, right?
Yep.
But it's almost like, because I guess this is new, and by the way, that's the other thing about it, it's like, don't you have to let it, how many teams are in this now, 12?
12.
Don't you have to let this play out for several years before you figure out whether it's a disaster that's been declared? What is it about this sport, or is it that SEC nonsense where you got so many SEC politicians that are constantly harping about their conference is better and no one else matters and we should have 9 teams in there? What is it about college football that makes us lose our minds about routes that happen in every sport all the time? Sunday night in Detroit, it was not a route the whole way, but it effectively turned into a semi-route. It happens. One team plays better than the other. Maybe if they play again the next week, and maybe we'll play them again in 2 weeks, it'll be a completely different game. Oregon versus Ohio State certainly was a different game the second time compared to the first one.
Well, first of all, the best tweet I saw about this in the last couple of weeks, and Indiana had the bad luck of being the first team to get blown out.
That's
because
true.
Friday night became, and that was our last day working together, right. I think. Or you actually might have been off. I think I was hosting.
And I watched. Yes. It was the night before I was leaving town, yeah.
So, because that was the only game that night, that then turned into a told you so for everybody that ever doubted Indiana.
Yes.
And, well, the schedule was this, and their head coach now is an idiot. And then the rest of the weekend was basically blowout city as well.
Right.
Somebody tweeted out at some point, there's no team hated in college football more than the non-blue blood that is about to maybe get into the blue blood territory. And I don't think it can be described any better, because whether it's SEC or Notre Dame or, Texas is now SEC, but because 8 to 10 teams have been so good for so long, everybody just gets used to that. The coaches get used to it. The media gets used to it. The fans get used to it. So anytime anybody else creaks in there for a cup of coffee,
yes,
they have to be immediately discredited if
they're not perfect,
if they're not up for it. And I just think it's so backwards. It defeats the purpose of what this whole thing was supposed to be.
Yes.
And I don't understand why they think you're going to be able to somehow legislate competitive games in the playoffs when it was 4 teams, which by definition, they were all really good. We were only arguing over maybe 1 or 2 other teams to be in the semifinals. And NCAA SID tweeted out the historical scores of the 4-team playoffs. Like 28 of the 38 games have been double-digit routes. Semis and finals.
When it was only 4, like you said.
And I don't get it at all. I mean, in this town, the Vikings have been blown out in 2 NFC championships games, 41 donut and 38-7. NFC title games, 1 game away from the Super Bowl. It happens. It's sports.
Yes.
Now, if you want to have discussions about should Oregon have had to play Ohio State first round when Penn State gets to play SMU at home and then Boise State because they got the bye. Like that, those are the discussions.
Those are legitimate discussions
you can have, but to just say, well, we told you, so we were just going to throw Ole Miss in there, or Alabama in there, another team. I don't get it. It's frustrated me.
It's just insane.
It's been an infuriating couple of weeks, and especially in college, because I know they're all getting paid now, and I know a lot of these, we're talking about the best teams, but you have a bad 15 minutes in college, and you're down 21-0 like Oregon was. Oregon had an unbelievable season.
Because of the nature of the game, I think, right?
So I've been as puzzled by it and as frustrated by it, and we're never going to get it perfectly right, where every game is going to be this instant classic that we're going to be replaying on. If ESPN Classic was still a channel, we'd be lining these games up. It's just not realistic.
Well, I think ultimately, by the way, Georgia lost to Notre Dame by more points than Indiana did. Now, Indiana had like a late run, you could say, that was a little bit cheap. They scored, I think, 2 touchdowns very late.
Yes.
But that game was, I think, with like 5 minutes to go in the second quarter, was 14-7.
Right.
Indiana was down, and they were punting, and that's when the punter mishandled the ball, and that handed 7 points to Notre Dame. I'm not saying they played great. They didn't. They did not play great in that game. You could say they handed early some ammunition to the critics, but as you say, Little did we know then that there are going to be a bunch of those. And then you go, well, if maybe that's just sort of the nature of it. And to then suggest in a 12-team tournament that, no, that team shouldn't be in, that team shouldn't be in, that team shouldn't be in, not even knowing for sure that the teams we want to be in there would have done all that much better anyway, because as you say, even when it was relatively blue blood with 4, the routes were routine, or the one-sided scores at least were routine.
And what do we have no idea if Indiana hosted Boise State?
Right.
How does that game go?
Exactly.
What if you just go down the list? Arizona State plays Tennessee. Does Tennessee have a better outcome? Like, we just don't know. It's never going to be perfect. I do think they're going to try to, I would guess they go away from conference champions, only get buys. That would be my guess, just because it does seem inherently unfair that Oregon can be the number 1 seed and then have to play a team that some people thought, Ohio State might win the national championship. I mean, going into the season, they were, and that's how it should be. These teams should end up playing each other. But Oregon's first game is a neutral site Rose Bowl game against Ohio State. That's tough. Like, that doesn't seem like that doesn't seem like, what's the word for it? The reward for being the undefeated number 1 seed. Whereas like Boise, Arizona State, they get to play these lower teams. I don't know, or their opponents get to play them in the second round. I don't know.
Now, did I ask you this? Did I ask you the Flavor Flav question yesterday?
If PJ knew about it?
Yeah, we did talk about this.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit.
That's true. We didn't really talk much about the game itself. Now, Virginia Tech, was that one of those teams where like everybody left?
They had 14 starters that did not play.
Okay.
From their last game.
The Gophers had a healthy number that also did not play, right?
7.
Including, was it Daniel Jackson among them?
Daniel Jackson, Justin Wally. Arian Ursary got hurt in the Wisconsin game. They're starting left tackle.
That's correct. But a couple of big
Cody
defensive names. Lindenberg, right?
All Big Ten linebacker didn't play.
Which was, as well. And I thought, I watched a decent amount of it. I mean, it was, I thought, a fairly workmanlike dominant performance. I mean, they definitely looked like the better club for sure. But I don't think there's any question that the hardest part about the TV broadcast was, I get it, it's like, well, we got a bit here, we got a product, it's Duke's Mail Bowl. But I mean, and the announcers did their best to try to sell it, but God, it was obnoxious. I mean, it just never stopped.
Yeah.
Ever stopped.
It was relentless.
Did you ever get mayoed? You
No.
got some, but did you ever get any on you?
No. Thankfully, I talked to PJ before the Mayo bath, and then I pretty much avoided him. So he tried to get Pierre, our guy Pierre Nugent, because they did an on-field interview after the Mayo bath, but I never got anywhere near him after that.
Here's the other thing. I got to give your guy, Pierre Nugent, credit. There's a good piece of video where then PJ's trying to hug him. And then Pierre's backing away. Yeah. And then so I think PJ had like an extra towel or a blanket just to put, and they ended up hugging him, thanking him for, being involved like you in the TV show all year. I wish I would have saved it. And I don't know if you have it or you know what I'm talking about. But PJ gave an answer to a question. I don't know if this was like pregame stuff or this was the day before when both coaches, I'm assuming, are there to answer questions.
Yep.
He gave one of the most un-PJ-like excellent answers I've ever heard to a serious question basically about, I think the question was something like, what
have you learned?
What have you learned? What do you know now that you didn't know?
Yeah, Burnsy asked him that.
And honest to God, I'm going, I understand PJ's not for me. I get that. But I came away from that, his answer, and the way he answered it, which was pretty straight, as if he answered everything like this, I'd try to have mine every week. Because I just thought it was, is he evolving, or was it just the specific moment that caught it, or am I underrating his ability to give non-jargon answers?
Yeah, I think he has great ability to do it. I think sometimes, though, he's so programmed to get to the talking points.
Yeah.
Especially when things aren't going well.
Right.
He likes to hammer home the message. But Burnsy, we talked about that on the Pair and a Spare podcast today, because Burnsy said it was for him, I think he described it as a rare moment of PJ Fleck vulnerability.
Yes, exactly.
He said he's not just saying the availability reports 2 hours before
yes.
Yeah, they're good offense, defense, special teams. And it was the essence of the answer was basically he's learned that he can't control everything. And he had the dinner, the staff dinner that they always do at a bowl game. PJ and Heather take the whole staff out for some big dinner. And he said, there's like 100 people in this room, and I'm thinking, I'm the idiot as a young coach that thinks I can control everything that these people are supposed to be doing for me. And that's not realistic. That's not real life. And so my growth has been hire people, let them work, and control what you can control, and that's it. And Burnsy has mentioned it. He's done a couple of other interviews and podcasts this week, Ryan from Gopher Illustrated, and he's brought it up 3 or 4 times because it hit him like it hit you.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I was like, well, is this him? Is this really him? Because, like you say, it was straightforward. It was vulnerable, showed a little bit of vulnerability. I mean, Mace is going to join us tomorrow. I mean, he's talked about this, I think, for years. That's a lesson I'm assuming every head coach has to learn, that, you know, your name's on the program. And so to a large extent, that means you should have a lot of authority because it's your rear end if it goes badly or if there's a scandal or whatever. But that ultimately it's getting bigger and bigger to a point now, especially, but maybe always to a certain extent, where you do just have to hire and trust the people you have. Now, of course, occasionally you get burned and then you have to do something about it and make a change and reel some people in. But that's the moment of epiphany for a lot of coaches, especially the young ones who do think, well, I've got to be involved in everything, right? That ultimately you'll die trying to do that. It's not even practical now, if it ever was. And so you're back to, my faith has to be, I'm doing a good job hiring people who then I can give the opportunity to go about and do their jobs, and everybody wins, and I keep my sanity.
It also extends now more than ever to the lack of control over your own players.
Right.
You know, it used to be, you could say, well, freshmen don't talk to the media, which is something that PJ and other coaches have done. And now it's, well, a lot of them have their own podcasts, or they have their own promotional appearances, or they have their own stuff that they want to get out because of name, image, and likeness. And so you've got to be okay with that too. You can't, like, you can have team rules, obviously, and things like that, but you don't have as much control over what players want to do, want to say, want to be at that you used to, and you have to live with that too. Otherwise, you're not going to get the players.
Let's get back to some Vikings conversation in our final segment today. A couple people are asking when Kessler's going to be back. I'm assuming tomorrow, I think.
As long as he made it back from Charlotte.
Well, that's true. I thought maybe he was going to be one of the season, one of the Viking stakeholders who took a trip also to Detroit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. If anybody would find a way, it would be him.
Yeah, I mean, and who defines that beautiful people role as a stakeholder more than Pat Kessler, in all honesty?
Pat Kessler's
he's
stakeholder.
He's got nothing but time, too.
Yes.
But apparently he did not make that trip. He did make the trip to Charlotte, as you said.
Yes, we were hanging out there.
But he did not make the trip to Detroit, and given the circumstance, the way it ended up, maybe that was a good thing. So we'll get to some Vikings, a couple more Vikings nuggets in our next segment, and Kessler will be back, we think, on tomorrow's broadcast, along with me.
Show Wrap brought to you as always by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washers since 1975.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
A lot of good meat and potatoes football conversation between 3 and 4:30, including a full hour visit with Kevin Seifert in studio between 3:30 and 4:30. If you are into podcasting the program later, Louie joined us with some good hockey talk, some good hockey history between 4:30 and 5 o'clock as well. We do expect Kessler in studio tomorrow. We expect Glenn Mason by telephone tomorrow to preview the National College Football Tournament, now down to a Final Four. Do I owe you a rip? I'm getting several people suggesting that you got ripped by Grimm on the Power Trip Morning Show.
Really?
One rip was you were underdressed for the conditions.
Yes.
And maybe these are related. The other one that just came in from Husker Preacher Guy is that you wimped out of postgame interviews because it was a dreadful 30 degrees. Grimm outed him on the morning show. Bud is weeping in his grave.
Some of that's true.
That might be true.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think, which one should I answer first? I was woefully unprepared for the conditions. I thought I was prepared for the conditions, which were like 35 or 40 degrees.
But it was a biting cold?
It was cold.
More than you thought.
And it was windy, and I had a jacket, and I had the hand warmers, and I had, I get the hand warmers that you can like stick, the body warmers. But I didn't have the right pants. I probably didn't have the right jacket. I probably could have used the heated vest that my in-laws got me for Christmas last year that I used the last 2 games.
Right.
Because it was like in the teens in Madison, and I felt terrific. And even the Penn State game, same thing. I I'll say I'll rip Grimm for ripping me because the post-game show included an outstanding on-field interview with PJ Fleck before the Mayo. So that's done. That's off. And the MVP, Elijah Spencer, on the field.
What did he want?
He wants like 50
7 more
guys.
interviews?
It's insane.
It's a meaningless bowl game.
Thank you.
Come on.
Thank you.
That's enough. The head
Thank
coach
you.
and the player of the game.
Camp Randall, we had like 5 players.
Yeah.
When they win the Axe, and 4 or 5 of them are
Right.
Daniel Jackson on the field, Quinn Carroll on the field crying.
Sure.
Jack Henderson, linebacker on the field, his last regular season game crying.
Sounds like we struck a nerve with
Well,
him.
I know how to do a post-game show. It's not my first. It's not my first on-field
rodeo?
post-game
Yeah,
show.
right.
And at the Duke's Mayo Bowl at midnight Eastern, we're good.
You're calling it quits.
We're
Yeah, it's
good.
enough. Yeah.
We got the head coach.
Right.
We got the MVP,
Yeah.
who was great on the radio. Talked about his journey and being so close to his hometown and all that. It's a wrap, man. It's time to go. Play the highlights and let's get on the plane.
So were you aware of his muttering then?
Absolutely.
Oh, you were.
We
Okay,
fight about this constantly.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, this is not
That's
a
pretty
new
good.
fight.
That's juicy.
We fight about this during like the
Yeah.
spring game. First of all, we don't need to do a post game on the spring game.
No,
at
you
all.
really don't.
We
That's
don't.
true. Yeah.
We don't need to do anything. We could talk to
Sometimes
PJ,
less is more.
and that's great. But let's just keep it in the window. Yeah, I have no guilt about my performance in the post game show. None.
All right, I'm glad I brought it up.
And
That's
it was
a good
freezing.
explanation.
It was so cold.
Well, that's the thing. I'm watching the game.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm watching, so I'm seeing people in the stands, and I'm going, well, they're all got jackets on. This doesn't sound, it's probably chilly. And then I associate bowl games with better weather. You know, like,
Yes.
okay, vacation. And I'm thinking, and Charlotte's a fine town, and I'm sure a lot of the Gopher fans who went, including Kessler, who will file a live report tomorrow, had fun.
It
whatever.
was a good time.
Probably
Yes.
had a good time. But I'm going, well, no, that's, if you have to wear your winter coat to the meaningless bowl game, I would say don't go.
It was the second coldest temperature for the Duke's Mayo Bowl in history. It was cold. It was chilly.
It absolutely looked
And
chilly.
having it at night doesn't help. It was about 50
true.
during the day, which was good.
Right.
Like if it was during the day, it would have been much different. It would have been a much more pleasant experience to watch because it was cold. And there's like a third string punter who I'm hoping enters the transfer portal, because he just hogged one of the heaters the whole game on the sideline. It was driving me crazy.
Oh, my goodness.
It's like, bro, you got to move a little bit. Get a jacket. You have heated benches. I can't sit on the heated benches.
Right.
Get away from the heater, bro. Like, if he enters the portal.
So he took away your ability to get closer to the heater?
At least once.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I'll have to go back and listen. And I'm glad Grimm did that because I feel like I'm on the right side here.
Yeah, I'm actually with you on this. Yeah, if you're accurately portraying.
The head coach and the MVP.
That's plenty. That's
Perfect.
probably one interview too many.
And I just
Duke's
stumbled into
Mayo
that.
Bowl. Come on,
because
man.
he was standing next to me on the riser watching PJ get doused with the mayo. So I said, hey, Elijah, this will be good. Couple of minutes with him and we're out.
Vikings to wrap up today. And, of course, it's now Rams week. So there'll be plenty of conversation the rest of the week. I need to know. I had mentioned earlier in the show a belief that that most Vikings fans and media outlets are going to work their way out of the 31-9 debacle enough that by Friday, overconfidence is going to be our only enemy. That there's going to be time to sort of process, and we're going to go, well, you put this together with this. Yeah, no. Look at what we've done all season. They've been an in-and-out team, blah, 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 blah. But the question to the audience is, and maybe I think it's kind of related to that question, because I do think by Friday or Saturday it'll be, well, why are we even playing this game? Now, I'm not sure we should go quite that far, but I think we're good at overcompensating. You know, we get it out of our system, and then you go, well, come on, we're fine. But are we fine? I guess my homework assignment to listeners going into tomorrow's show is, how nervous are you about this game? And if you're nervous, and you're not going to necessarily by Friday be overconfident, what is that about? Is it simply about the way the team performed in Detroit, or is it something about the team they're playing? Because for me, it's the latter as much as it is the former. Even though I know the Rams aren't great, and I know that if you're the kind of team that the Vikings believe they are, you should go to L.A. and beat the Rams.
Yeah.
Period. End of story, right? But they've got something about them that I think does make this tricky. Not the least of which is the quarterback is a pro. He's not always great at this point in his career, but he is heady. He's seen everything. we were talking about this with Kevin Seifert, that you could say against maybe the two headiest quarterbacks that this team has played this year, our combined record is 0-3.
Yeah.
Two
Right.
losses to Detroit and Goff, and one loss to Stafford. And that, at the very least, that might be a little bit concerning. I think their defensive line is good. They may not even need to worry about throwing the kitchen sink about blitzing everybody because they have a more legitimate defensive line, as Seifert also pointed out to us. So I think this is a tricky game. I'm not ready to say I'm picking the Rams to win. I got ripped for picking the Lions to win last week, but I felt vindicated. You picked the Lions. I don't even know if you intended to.
No, I would have picked the Vikings, but
yeah,
Marty?
I think Max got confused by, because I don't think he saw what games you picked. Then he assumed that the Caps were the teams you wanted to win as opposed to the fact that that was the home team.
Right.
But I think you got credit for the victory even if you didn't want it.
Well, I needed it because I was floundering late in the season.
Yeah, I think I was. I think I'm 1-2. I got that game right. I think the other two wrong. I'm not even sure. But plenty of time to get to all of that as we get closer and closer to game day on Monday Night Football. What's coming up next?
Vikings country, Muss and John Randall.
Oh, Johnny Randall?
Yeah, Johnny Randall
That's
tonight.
outstanding.
And then Wild Hockey.
Minnesota Wild Hockey, I believe the Blues are the opponent. We will talk to you tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
No excuses, no explanations. Do what we do. Let's ride.